where it's often difficult to distinguish combatants from non-threatening civilians, commanders are relying more and more heavily on the unique scouting and observation capabilities of their sniper teams.
All the commanders in the Marine Corps, they look at snipers as being a combat multiplier. It's almost like a supporting arm, like mortars, like machine guns. They perform reconnaissance duties, they go forward and collect intelligence and information and radio that back. They could also be sent out on specific sniper missions to look for certain targets. It might be a leader of an organization, it might be a member of a group, it might be a piece of equipment to knock out a radio transmitter.
To prepare students for such varied and critical functions, the school equips them with an impressive array of advanced navigation, concealment, and communication skills. But the skill most central to the sniper's craft, and the one that's been valued above all others by the Marine Corps for the last 2¼ centuries, is long-range precision marksmanship.
This will be your first, second, and third stage of Marine Corps qualification course.
The ethos of our Marine Corps is that every Marine is a rifleman. From our inception, it's been the rifleman and his marksmanship abilities that have been central to who we are as a Corps. In the days of the sailing Navy, it was the Marine marksmen and the fighting cops that often made the difference in a naval sea battle between ships. Delivering accurate rifle fire and taking out the opposing ship's chain of command and destroying that ship's cohesion and making the difference in winning the victory.
But in the confusion of those early sea battles, Marine marksmen high in a ship's riggings often had difficulty distinguishing friend from foe.
It's hard to say who the good guys are and who the bad guys are in the smoke. And since you have boarding parties going from one ship to the other and back and forth, you're not really sure who you're shooting at.
Early Marines soon devised a clever way to avoid friendly fire from their sharpshooters overhead.
They tied a coil of rope on top of the cover so that if you were looking down your musket, you would see this coil of rope and not shoot at that individual.
A symbol of this early battle custom survives today. The top of a Marine officer's dress hat bears an emblem called a quatrefoil, a cross made from a coil of rope.
Another indication, I think, of how important marksmanship is to the Marine Corps at large is we wear very few things on our uniforms. But we do wear badges that denote our qualifications with a service rifle. There are only two physical skills that are put on our performance reports. Our physical fitness score and our marksmanship score. Those things are all considered when it comes time to promote a Marine.
The emphasis on marksmanship, born in the early sea battles fought by Marines, steadily intensified over the course of the 19th century. This growing specialization coincided with a gradual shift in the overall mission of the Marine Corps. By the turn of the 20th century, the Corps had all but relinquished its role as a unit of sea soldiers and had evolved into a more land-based fighting force. To keep their marksmanship instructors abreast of the latest advances in shooting science and technique, by the 1910s, the Marines were fielding competitive rifle teams in national shooting matches.
By World War I, the Marine Corps had gotten extremely expert in long-range shooting. They had competed on a national level. They were always right on the edge. They were vying with the U.S. Army to see who was going to be the national champion, and it was a matter of honor of service. And the Marine Corps was, aside from just your teams, they taught everybody how to shoot long range. And they taught everybody how to adjust sights. I mean, it was a true art.
The instrument with which Marines practiced this art was the bolt-action 5-shot M1903 Springfield rifle, the most accurate and reliable service weapon in the world at the time. And in France in 1918, the Marines demonstrated just how effective the weapon really could be. On June 1st, 1918, the 4th Marine Brigade collided with a German infantry unit at an obscure spot on the Western Front called Belleau Wood. During the initial phase of the battle, the Marines held positions on hills overlooking the wood itself.
And the Germans were moving around down in the wood, and we're talking maybe 750 to 1,000 yards. But the Marines had demonstrated just prior to moving in there to the Frenchmen their long-range ability with the rifles, and the Frenchmen laughed. They thought it was a gimmick, a trick. So what? What are you going to do with it? Well, they showed them what they were going to do with it.
Marine riflemen opened fire, and the shots began downing enemy soldiers at 700 and 800 yards.
They captured some of the German troops in Belleau Wood, and the troops were complaining. They had letters in their jacket that they had written home. They were complaining, said these men are animals, said they are shock troops, and their rifle fire begins to kill at 700 yards. We get hit before we even hear the rifle go off.
Several days of bitter combat in Belleau Wood followed this initial long-range shooting match, but the Marine Corps doctrine of making every Marine a superior marksman had proven its legitimacy. In the coming decades, a special group of Marines would push battlefield marksmanship to the extreme and establish a doctrine of their own. One shot, one kill. The static trench-bound warfare that characterized much of World War I gave rise to a special breed of battlefield marksmen. Employed by both the Allied and German armies, these highly trained riflemen specialized in picking off enemy troops who carelessly exposed themselves. Adept at camouflage and concealment, these designated sharpshooters came to be called snipers. Originally a British term, the word sniper was derived from the British practice in India of hunting snipe.
Small, elusive bird that's hard to find, difficult to stalk. Doesn't expose itself for very long, and it's small enough that it's a marksmanship challenge to shoot one. And the ones who are best at this were called snipers.
While the U.S. Marine Corps did not officially field snipers in the Great War, Marine officers did witness their effectiveness. The British, the Canadians, and even the U.S. Army experimented with sniper tactics and equipment at various points in the conflict. But at the cessation of hostilities, the knowledge of sniping tactics that had accumulated over the course of the war went home with the snipers themselves. No official manuals were written, no course of instruction established. The knowledge was simply lost. 20 years later, at the opening of World War II, the Marines were among the first to suffer the consequences of this lack of foresight. Seeing the potential value of snipers in upcoming battles, the Marine Corps elected to open 2 official scout sniper schools, one on each coast. Marine Captain Walter Walsh, a former FBI agent, was tapped to run the school at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
We were literally flying by the seat of our pants. There was no information, or very little information available. As I recall, only thing that we had available at the time with some reference to sniping was a book by an individual named McBride.
Herbert W. McBride had written a book entitled A Rifleman Went to War. The book recounted his experiences as a sniper with the Canadian Army in World War I.
Well, McBride had some information in his book, but not in very great detail. But at least it was a starting point. And from there, we went on our own to develop a sniper school.
The Marine Corps selected sniper candidates from units soon destined for battles in the Pacific.
You took these people out into the boondocks, and you tried to teach them something about the use of a compass and map reading, so that they could find their way out, and especially back. We'd like to have them back. But the main work with the snipers was on silhouette-type targets set in the woods in a training area at various distances, up to 600 yards at least.
Students learned the use of the M1903A1, the standard Springfield service rifle, with the addition of an 8-power Unertl brand scope. And they trained to work in pairs. One person, the sniper, would actually take the shot. His partner, the spotter, would help him find targets and direct fire using a separate telescope. But traditional sniper tactics proved to be of little help in the beach landing operations the Marines conducted in the Pacific.
The war in the Central Pacific was basically short-range stuff. You don't need a powerful telescopic sight. You don't have the opportunity to send snipers out to get in concealed positions, waiting for the enemy or seeking out the enemy. The fighting was too quick, too short range. They were not dug in. You don't have the chance to get into a good position and stay there. The kind of fighting you dash, duck, dodge, throws up, shot, get out of sight. That is not conducive to sniping as we think of it.
However, in battles in which the fighting was more protracted, such as in the campaign for Okinawa, scout snipers did have an opportunity to exercise their skills. While much of Okinawa is covered in jungle, the southern end of the island is relatively open, with gently undulating hills. The Japanese employed snipers of their own in this territory.
In one particular instance, a sniper was in a cave controlling an entire valley and had a squad of Marines pinned down for several hours. The squad couldn't move, they couldn't see where the sniper was firing from.
A young Marine scout sniper, Private First Class Daniel Cass, was called to the scene.
With his spotter, they were able to move forward enough to where they found the squad of Marines, got into a position where they could also see the cave, and when the Japanese sniper fired through the spotting scope, they could actually see the muzzle flash. And with that, he was directed on where to fire. And his spotter would say shift left, or raise 2 feet, or drop 1 foot when he saw the bullet strikes on the rock. Finally, on about the 5th shot, he killed the Japanese sniper, and the squad was saved.
Marine Corps snipers in Korea 5 years later engaged their enemy counterparts in similar hilltop-to-hilltop shooting matches. By 1952, the fighting in Korea had settled into a fairly static trench-style warfare, the ideal environment for well-trained long-range marksmen. One relatively quiet day, Staff Sergeant John Boyknot, a Marine platoon sergeant and an excellent shot, was at the front with his sniper rifle.
He was on the line and he was shooting at the enemy, but they were keeping down and he couldn't get good shots.
Boyknot and his Marines were taking cover in a trench system, one trench leading to a supply area in the rear.
So Private Henry Friday, a member of Boyknot's company, said, "It's time I went back for breakfast, Sergeant." And Boyknot said, "Go ahead." When Friday ran down the trench, a sniper reared up and tried to shoot him. So Boyknot said, "Hold it, Friday." He got himself all ready, and he said, "Come to me." So Friday ran toward him, upraised the sniper, and Boyknot killed him. Boyknot and Friday teamed up there until the general stopped him. Said it was too dangerous for Friday, and Friday would make the run and Boyknot would shoot. Boyknot killed 9 enemy from that position.
Snipers like John Boyknot helped demoralize enemy troops and disrupt their operations through the end of the war. But despite these accomplishments, and those of scout snipers in World War II, when the fighting ended in Korea, the Marine Corps sniper program fell victim to peacetime budget cuts. Knowledge of the deadly art once again faded into obscurity. It would take an unconventional war against an exceptionally cunning and determined enemy to prove the value of the scout sniper once and for all. In the spring of 1965, the 3rd Marine Division landed in the Republic of South Vietnam. Their mission was to defend the tiny embattled country against encroachment by communist forces. But the difficulty the Marines soon discovered was that the enemy in Vietnam did not stand and fight. Instead, he relied heavily on ambushes and other unconventional tactics.
Most of the casualties that we got in early 1965 either came from snipers or from booby traps. The booby traps a lot of times were crude. We were fighting the Viet Cong, and they were using a lot of things they'd used against the French. Old mines, punji stakes, punji pits, grenades on tripwires, this sort of thing, and then snipers. Very seldom would they ever have a stand-up engagement with us. And it was very frustrating because we were always trained to fight the last war. We were trained to go take kills and fight the Chinese, and now we were sent to Vietnam and we're in rice paddies, and we're up against snipers and guerrillas who shoot a few shots and then run and hide in a hole someplace, and we couldn't find them. We were taking casualties, wounded, some killed, from ranges farther than we could reach out with our standard M14.
The Marines realized they needed snipers of their own, and they needed them right away. A young captain named Bob Russell was tasked with forming a sniper platoon, but in 1965, no official course of instruction for sniping existed in the Marine Corps. The only officer with recent experience in this area was then Captain Jim Land, a member of the Marine Corps shooting team attached to the Marksmanship Training Unit at Quantico, Virginia. Land had developed and conducted a sniper course at a Marine base in Hawaii a few years earlier.
Captain Russell sent me a letter and asked for the material that we had developed in Hawaii to use as the basis for the 3rd Marine Division Scout Sniper School. I sent him, of course, my training syllabuses, my lesson plans, even sent him my copy of The Rifleman Went to War.
Soon, Marine snipers were in the field in Vietnam, armed with high-powered hunting rifles such as the Winchester Model 70 and the Remington Model 700. They worked in 2-man teams, just as they had in World War II. One man would act as the sniper, the other as the spotter. However, both men were highly trained shooters, each capable of taking the shot.
We would attach ourselves to a patrol that was going out from the lines at nighttime, from whatever base area we were in or whatever battalion area we were in. We would go out on this patrol at nighttime, and somewhere along the line we would pick a spot where we would drop off and stay behind. And the patrol would go ahead and accomplish the rest of its mission and go on home. The next morning we would be set up in a place where we had a good overwatch position where we could see across the rice paddies or down in the valley or wherever.
Sniper-spotter teams were usually paired at random. Even so, it became apparent immediately to any new team that maximum cooperation was critical to their success.
My first target was out of range of our typical range that we had for the rifle. Our maximum effective range was 1,100 meters. This target was 1,300 meters.
So I calculated a rough calculation as to what the bullet would do at 1,300 meters. And of course, my very first shot was a miss, which was kind of an embarrassment to me. But as we had planned for and trained for, my spotter was able to see that round going downrange by putting his spotter scope a quarter out of focus, and you're able to pick up the vapor trail. He said, right 5, up 5, meaning 5 feet. And I just held the crosshairs over the target's head, who at this point was just wondering what happened, and the second round went down and got him.
Teams also realized, sooner or later, that the hunting of human beings could present momentous psychological pitfalls.
Sniping is a very, very personal business. Typically, your infantry have on-air bullets to whom it may concern. Your bullet, however, has a distinct person on it, because you can lay in wait and watch and observe that person. You are waiting for your moment in time to end this person's life. And that's where it becomes very, very personal. In one particular case, we waited for an enemy soldier to finish his lunch, after which we decided to take him out. So you decide the moment, the time, the place where you're going to end this soldier's life. Some people can't handle it. Some people can't take a life in that regard.
Most Marine snipers, however, could take comfort in the knowledge that in taking enemy lives, they were saving the lives of their comrades. On one occasion, for Sergeant Chuck Moeni, this was especially true. As Moeni and his spotter sat in a concealed location next to a river, a North Vietnamese regular army scout appeared on the opposite bank. The scout then crossed the stream in the direction of a nearby growth of elephant grass.
He walked out on the bank on the side next to us, and he was close enough that night that I could hear the water dripping off of him. That's how close he was.
Moeni's company was located in the elephant grass a couple of hundred yards to the rear.
He started towards the elephant grass, and I started to go ahead and dispatch him because I couldn't let him get between me and the company.
As Moeni began to squeeze the trigger, the enemy scout stopped in his tracks.
He stood there for a moment, walked back down by the bank, and then decided to cross the river again and go back. So we let him cross the river, and I told my partner, this might get real interesting. Well, it did. Later that evening, here they come. An entire line of NVA started to cross the river in the same route he took. They had all their gear on, their packs on, holding their rifles up. And as soon as the first one started up the bank on our side, I went to work. Got 16 rounds off that night, as fast as I could fire the weapon. Every one of them were headshots. They were dead center. I could see these bodies floating down the river. We started drawing small arms fire, retreated. We went back to our company. They never did cross the river that night.
While most Marine snipers in Vietnam typically worked in close support of their units, usually operating within a few hundred yards of company lines, occasionally, snipers were sent on missions deep into enemy territory. The exploits of one such Marine, based on Hill 55, would become the stuff of legend. In September 1966, Captain Jim Land arrived in Vietnam. He had come specifically to train and organize scout snipers for the 1st Marine Division, which would soon relieve the 3rd Division in the area near Da Nang. Land faced an array of challenges. Like Bob Russell before him, he was left to his own resources in acquiring equipment and personnel for his new sniper platoon.
I had no guns. I had no instructors. I never had an office. The one thing that I did have was I knew the location of just about every distinguished marksman in Vietnam.
Distinguished marksmen were top-scoring Marine Rifle Team competitors. One such individual, who had been assigned as a military policeman in Vietnam, was Sergeant Carlos Norman Hathcock.
He was a country boy, learned how to shoot at a very young age, went into the Marine Corps. His shooting skills went with him, and he ended up being a national rifle competitor, won the Wimbledon Cup for long-range rifle competition.
Carlos Hathcock had also attended Jim Land's Scout Sniper course in Hawaii 5 years earlier. Land soon had the champion shooter reassigned to the new 1st Marine Division Sniper Platoon, which Land located on Hill 55, 12 miles south of Da Nang. Hathcock's extraordinary talent as a sniper revealed itself immediately.
The thing that made Carlos different was his ability to totally integrate himself within the environment. We all developed an edge. We all became very observant and were able to function in the environment. But Carlos actually became a part of the environment. He had the patience, the drive, the courage to do the job. He felt very strongly that he was saving Marines' lives.
Hathcock had a special talent for counter-sniping. In a short time, he had eliminated a number of enemy snipers that had been killing Marines in the Hill 55 area. In frustration, the enemy eventually put a reward on his head and sent a master sniper nicknamed the Cobra to kill him.
Hathcock found out about this, and he was told maybe we better, move you or not send you out to the field. And his idea was, no, he says, I'm the best there is, I'm going after this guy. And so it became a situation off Hill 55 where this alleged Cobra sniper was shooting Marines and trying to draw Hathcock out. Finally came to the day where Hathcock went out with his spotter, and they set up at a place that if he were the other guy, that's where he would be that morning.
Hathcock had been stalking the Cobra sniper for several days and had learned some of his habits.
As the sun came up, this one particular area, he was scanning across this ravine into the bush, and he saw a glint of a scope. He knew that's what it was. So he aimed at the glint, settled his crosshairs on it, squeezed the round off, and then they went to find out if they had done any damage. And of course, the Cobra sniper was dead. The story is that the bullet went through the scope and hit the guy in the eye, killed him. Hathcock said, I didn't think about it till later. He says, I was looking at that guy, but he was looking at me. I was just a little quicker on the trigger.
Carlos Hathcock's reputation blossomed, and his notoriety soon brought him the most harrowing challenge of his career. He was offered a mission so top secret that he had to accept or reject it based solely on the knowledge that it was extremely hazardous, and that the odds of his surviving it were slim. Hathcock accepted.
They gave him a piece of a map. He didn't even know where it came from. And it was just a section that showed some hills, some jungle, and streams, and some buildings. They put him on a helicopter, and they flew him for several hours to the northwest out of Da Nang. He knew it had to be into North Vietnam or someplace near it. The mission was to stalk and kill a North Vietnamese officer of senior rank.
The chopper unloaded him at a remote landing zone and left. Hathcock was behind enemy lines and alone. He made his way through the jungle a short distance until he came to a field of high grass. On the opposite side of the field sat the heavily guarded quarters of a North Vietnamese army general. Carlos entered the grass and began the most painstaking stalk of his life. He would creep his way toward the target on his sides and belly for the next 3 days.
He was able to move only as far as the wind moved the grass. That was his guideline, which meant he might be able to move an inch or maybe even 2 inches at a time, and then he would have to stop. Otherwise, it would expose him. He was really not able to eat or drink during that period of time. A few times he was able to, at night, get a drink of water. During that period of time, the enemy patrols were around him, and at times he was very much in danger of actually being stepped on. They were that close.
Finally, the Marine sniper reached a point in the field from which he could take a shot. He knew that each morning, the general came out of his quarters to be picked up by a car.
When the general came out, Carlos lined him up in the crosshairs and watched as the general raised his hands up in the air to stretch, his early morning stretch, and then Carlos squeezed the round off, striking the general in the chest and knocking him down. Carlos said that all heck broke loose then. People began scurrying everywhere. All kinds of activity happened. He knew that he had to get out of there as quick as possible, but he couldn't just stand up and run, so he ended up having to crawl back out of the field again, taking a different route this time, got back into the woods, and made his way back to the LC and was eventually picked up and extracted.
Much of Hathcock's body was raw from contact with the ground and from hundreds of ant bites. While the covert nature of the mission disallowed any official awards for Carlos Hathcock, his incredible exploit would earn him everlasting fame in the Scout Sniper community, a fame that has now grown to legend since his premature death from illness in 1999. Despite the contributions to the war effort made by Marine Corps snipers, when U.S. troops pulled out of Vietnam in the mid-1970s, the Scout Sniper program was again in danger of being shelved. However, Jim Land, now attached to Headquarters Marine Corps, would not stand by and watch that happen. He began a lobbying effort for the establishment of a permanent Scout Sniper program, and he used the example of Carlos Hathcock to illustrate just how effective a sniper could be.
His example was actually bigger than life. You couldn't have made up a fictitious sniper and done any better.
With the help of Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Reynolds, Major Dick Culver, and others, Land eventually succeeded. The weapons training unit at Marine Corps Base Quantico, Virginia, would host the first school. Captain Jack Cuddy became the program's first officer in charge. Cuddy was already a distinguished marksman, but to complement his knowledge of advanced fieldcraft, He attended foreign sniper schools in both Canada and Great Britain.
Most of what we do to this day is very much unchanged from what we started in 1976. Things like stalking, things like individual movement, camouflage and concealment, observation, range estimation, all those types of fieldcraft skills. Going to the Canadian school and the British school was very, very valuable in that regard.
Cuddy also helped develop a new rifle, specially designed for snipers.
If you look at American military sniper rifles in general, and Marine Corps sniper rifles in particular, throughout history, they have always been either service rifles, hunting rifles, or target rifles pressed into service as a sniper rifle. And on top of them was either a hunting or a target scope pressed into service as a sniper's scope. We had never had a weapon that was designed to be a sniper weapon from the ground up.
The Precision Weapons Shop at Quantico, which normally made specialized weapons for the Marine rifle teams, took up the challenge. With the guidance of Jack Cuddy and Chief Warrant Officer Neil Goddard, they mixed and matched components from a variety of guns to come up with the ideal Marine sniper rifle, the M40A1. Among its many specialized components are a heavy-gauge free-floating barrel for increased accuracy, a virtually indestructible fiberglass stock, and an updated Unirtle brand scope with user-friendly sight adjustments.
And the beauty of this thing, we thought, was that we're going to have a rifle that's designed by Marines, built by Marines, and employed by Marines. That's a significant thing, because these armorers who make these guns know that when they hand it off to somebody, that Marine they're giving it to, they're sending it to, is going to carry it to combat. So they take great care in making sure this thing is right before it leaves here.
Over the next quarter century, both the M40A1 rifle and the training program developed at Quantico would serve Marine snipers well in a multitude of combat circumstances. For a Marine Corps commander, the precision rifle fire his snipers provided has never been more critical than in recent years. Peacekeeping and security operations in places like Somalia, the Balkans, and elsewhere have exposed Marine units to a type of threat that cannot always be met with conventional tactics. Hostile elements in these areas of civil strife frequently take cover in crowds of innocent civilians. This eliminates the possibility of a standard infantry assault. In many cases, surgical rifle fire is a commander's only option. In 1997, in the tiny African country of Sierra Leone, a well-placed round delivered by a Marine sniper helped stabilize a potentially explosive situation. A battalion of the 2nd Marine Regiment was ordered into Sierra Leone to provide security for the U.S. Embassy. Anti-government rebels had been threatening the embassy compound.
The rebels would come up and they would challenge the Marines. They would brandish their weapons, point them towards them, crank off rounds in the air, and it was a very uncomfortable environment, a very hostile environment, which they ruled. We did not rule, even though we were on the ground.
Incensed, the Marine commander issued a warning to the rebels.
These are the things we won't tolerate. Don't point your weapons towards the embassy. Don't fire rounds into the air. We have the inherent right to self-defense. Therefore, if you put weapons towards us, we will take action against you individually.
But the rebels ignored the words of caution.
Eventually, after a lot of intelligence, a lot of collection from a lot of assets, they found out who the leaders were, and the opportunity came where the leader came forward and attempted to point a sniper rifle towards the U.S. forces. And at that point, the United States Marine Corps sniper took that individual out. The message had been sent home with vigor, I might add, because at that point, anybody who walked past the U.S. lines, they would actually take the magazine out of their weapon, and they'd hold the weapon in the air to signify that I have no hostile intent towards the U.S. Marines or the U.S. Embassy, and they would move on by before they put it back in and moved on their merry way. So we went from a very hostile, unpredictable environment to a very calm, very predictable environment based on utilization of the snipers.
When they know you can reach out and touch them purposely and with intent and with precision fire, they have a tendency to behave themselves.
For 25 years, the Marine Corps Scout Sniper program has been training students to deliver that precision fire. Since its establishment in 1977, the program has evolved into one of the most physically and mentally demanding courses of instruction in the U.S. military.
Now let's go, that second shooter, go ahead and load!
Many experienced Marines and Army Rangers and Navy SEALs and all those guys come through the schools. They don't always pass.
10 weeks in length, the current program is divided into 3 phases.
The first phase of the basic course is the academics package. Everything that Marine is going to learn going through sniper school, academically, he'll learn in that first phase. Along with teaching classes, he'll go down range for about a month straight. So for 30 days, he's going to shoot that sniper rifle, and we're going to train him to qualify with it.
Even in this early phase of the training, students must deal with relentless physical challenges.
Have them run because it gets their heart rate up, and they're going to be dealing with that in a combat situation.